You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, this is Dr. Justin Marchegiani, and welcome to another awesome episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. Again, we have a great show in store for you. Before, go to beyondwellnessradio.com. Click on the newsletter sign-up button. You can sign up for our newsletter and get show updates right in your inbox before anyone else. You can also click on the questions button and even speak questions live, and we'll be able to answer it on the air for you. You can also click on the write a review button. If you really enjoy the show, write us a review. Let us know on iTunes. Let the world know. Think of one person that would benefit from listening to this show and share it with them. Sharing is caring. Also, check out justinhealth.com, which is my personal site. Again, I have some complimentary functional medicine consults available. You can also sign up for the free thyroid series and female hormone series as well. You can also go to reallyhealthynow.com. That's Barris Harvey's website, where he has some great articles and blogs and videos for you there as well, and even some consultations. Again, we have an awesome show in store. Stay tuned. Hey there, it's Dr. Justin. Welcome back to Beyond Wellness Radio. Today we have an awesome guest, Dr. Robert Rickowski. And Dr. Bob, as he's known, is a applied kinesiologist, a functional medicine specialist. He's lectured all around the world on the aspects such as clinical nutrition, functional medicine, human performance. He's worked with professional athletes in all sports and works with basically anyone that's trying to achieve peak performance and improve their health. Dr. Bob, how are we doing today?
Hey, I'm absolutely fabulous. I'm honored to be your guest and looking forward to sharing.
That's so great. So Dr. Bob, tell me a little bit about how you got into this field. I heard your story, I think, once at a lecture. If I remember, you had headaches or migraines. Or can you talk about how you got into this field of functional medicine and chiropractic?
Well, actually, it goes back to a sports injury. I was playing football in college. Yeah, and I got hurt playing football. Didn't know anything about chiropractic. Went to my medical doctor. Gave me muscle relaxers, painkillers, put my neck in a brace, my arm in a sling. Long story short, I went out on a date that night and had one drink, just one, and fell asleep behind the wheel of my vehicle at 55 miles per hour. Fortunately, my date grabbed the wheel, shook me. I pulled over to the side of the road. She said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. I just passed out." And so she drove home, and I got back, and I picked up this bottle of medicine and said, "Wow, don't mix with alcohol, don't operate heavy machinery." My bad for not reading that first.
Wow.
But I just thought, this stuff almost killed me, and I literally threw it away. I said, "I'm not taking anything like that ever again." So I went back to the gym. I was kind of a gym rat in those days, still loved to train daily. But, the owner of the gym looked at me and says, "Wow, you look like you've been hit by a train." I said, "Yeah, that's about how I feel." He said, "Well, you need a good chiropractor." I didn't even know what one was, but I said, "Sure, I'll go." And chiropractor Mike Wickers, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, helped me so much, so fast, and he worked with a lot of athletes. And just by balancing my body, not only helped me get over pain, but helped me take up my own performance. And then eventually that led to a passion for nutrition. And I saw massive changes in nutrition. I was probably a typical teen eating burgers and fries and shakes and switching over to a good diet and baseline supplementation. Took my game to a whole new level. So that passion started about 35 years ago, and literally have studied nutrition almost daily for that entire period of time, and have been blessed to have been able to teach it all over the world and share and help world champion athletes take up their game, as well as people that were supposedly sent home to die. And some of them are still alive 20 years later and doing much better. So it's been a great journey.
Very cool. And you were actually one of the physicians that I studied growing up, and I chose chiropractic because I wanted to work in the field of functional medicine, but I also saw what you were doing with applied kinesiology and helping people at such high levels. And I imagine you agree, when you add the nutrition element to applied kinesiology and chiropractic, patients get better so much faster. Is that true?
That's an absolutely indisputable fact. The Journal of the American Medical Association has been releasing an article called Actual Causes of Death, and they do it every decade. The first time they did it was 1990, and they said the number one cause was cigarette smoking, number two, poor diet. In 2000, it was the same, but there was a flip-flop in 2010, the last time it was published, and they estimate that 670,000 people per year, U.S., die from poor diet. Number 2 is cigarette smoking at 460,000. But interestingly, that they had on the list were, increased body mass index, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high blood sugar. And last I checked, those are all due to poor diet and lack of exercise. And by the way, lack of exercise was number 3. So you start dealing with diet and exercise and stress management, and you've got the big 3 in helping people get better.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And you have a very interesting strategy in your practice. You have the functional medicine side where you're really into testing and science and laboratory evaluation. And then you also married the chiropractic in with a really high quality assessment with the kinesiology. You have also your 5-minute exam. And I've studied all your kinesiology work. Can you talk more about how you apply kinesiology with your chiropractic patients and why you're able to get such great results?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back to my best instructor in chiropractic college, and again, I had many greats, but Dr. Frank Ferraro, walked into a class of chiropractors and he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. What do chiropractors do?" And ultimately, he wanted to come down to the answer of chiropractors move bones. Then he asked, "What do muscles do?" Well, the answer is muscles move bones. Who does a better job? The muscles. They do it 24/7, 365. It's their pure job. So he said very simply, if you're not working with the muscles, if you're not assessing the muscles, if you're not balancing the muscles, you're missing the body's own corrections. So kinesiology just simply assesses the muscular balance. And, it's ancient wisdom that goes back to Hippocrates. He said, in disease, look to the spine first. But really what I think he was saying was look to the paraspinal muscles, the muscles that support and stabilize the spine. Because I don't really care who the athlete is, whether they're going for their 4th or 5th world championship or a weekend warrior. You can always find that you can improve the paraspinal muscle balance to improve their core, strength, stability, function, flexibility. And when you do, you improve their performance. And it's across the board. Now, you start marrying that to clinical nutrition, where you realize that there's a lot of people that have, most people are familiar with this vitamin D issue, where people are vitamin D deficient. And people are omega-3 deficient. And people tend to be generally mineral deficient, even though magnesium gets the big rap on that one. But reality is good baseline nutrition, good detoxification, improving the diet, balancing the core muscles, improving the body chemistry. Most of my Olympic athletes have a PR or personal record, personal best, within 2 weeks of seeing me. And that comes in whether they come in injured or healthy. We can move their body to a whole new level within 2 weeks.
That's great. And I know you're famous for this, the 5-minute exam that you teach all doctoral students. Can you just walk, just the average person, when they're coming in to see you, and again, Dr. Bob's in Houston, Texas, so anyone that wants to fly down, Dr. Bob sees patients from all over the world. Can you talk about your 5-minute exam, Dr. Bob?
Yeah, it's interesting that it takes a little bit of a skill set to get it done in 5 minutes, but literally I start at the extremities. And I look at what are known as myotome indicators or muscle indicators for every level of the spine related to the lower extremity, which is going to start essentially at about the 3rd lumbar vertebra all the way down to the 2nd sacral vertebra or 2nd sacral neurology segment. In the cervical spine, you can easily get the lower cervical spine, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th cervical nerve root. We have a little different technique for the upper cervical spine, which is based on head position and neurology and ability to flex, extend, rotate. But literally, we go through both the extremities and the core in less than 5 minutes. And then we also do a screening of things that are known as viscerosomatic reflexes. Reflexes where the organ systems actually show an imbalance or tender point or active acupuncture point on the outside of the body. And what I've told my students for years is my mindset is, my thesis is, in the absence of trauma, bodies break down on the inside before they break down on the outside. And so we also know that the whole body works together, meaning everything that happens on the inside affects the outside. And if you know how to look at the outside, look at these reflex points, look at the muscles, look at the acupuncture system, within 5 minutes you can determine where the patient's greatest imbalance is. And by addressing that, that's how we get the biggest bang for our buck. So, I had a professional football player come in a couple of years ago, and I've got a video of him. In fact, I technically have a video release, so I could probably share his name. But this guy had a turf toe, and he had been dealing with it for 2 years, and he was losing his starting job because he couldn't push off. Imagine being a defensive end, 280 pounds, and against the guys they're against. Well, what we actually found out, it really wasn't his foot at all. Even though the manifestation was in his foot, he had an imbalance in his core, which was actually related to his liver. That imbalance actually caused a little bit of a nerve pressure that collapsed the arch of his foot and put a lot of pressure on that toe. But literally, we made it so much better in 1 week. Now, this guy went on to win a Super Bowl, signed a $28.5 million extension, is considered the number 3 defensive end in all of football right now. And so going from being in jeopardy of losing his starting position, and keep in mind, if you've got a turf toe, you're going to modify your step. When you're on a football field with those kind of animals, who knows if you would have tore up an ankle, a knee, something that could have been career-ending. But instead, that transitioned to a $28.5 million extension, which is a nice deal, just a nice feather in the cap. And I always say I need a better agent because I probably should have somehow negotiated for 1% of that or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get a fraction of a percent, that'd be amazing. Great, awesome. Now, one of the things that you do that's really unique, and I find a lot of chiropractors miss the boat on this, is assessment for disc issues in the lower spine and upper spine. Can you talk about just how you assess disc and how that disc bulging or protrusion can really shut down the whole nervous system, or at least those nerve roots that are involved?
Sure. Well, realistically, if you want to actually really confirm it's a disc, you want an imaging study like an MRI, which by the way, I rarely order.
Right.
But when you're looking at the strength of the lower extremity, what I'll do is I'll put the patient in a high-pressure circumstance, a compromised circumstance. Mm-hmm. Most chiropractors look at patients when they're lying down, but literally if you have them seated with their knees tucked up to their chest and maybe their head flexed forward, American Family Physician actually showed that increases the pressure in the lower discs by 600 to 800%.
Oh, it's that much. Wow.
Then we also, it's tremendous. I can send you the article. Yeah. And then when you put the leg in a position, I like to test medial and lateral stability of the knee with the rotators. And if you flex the knee all the way up, the most stable position of the knee is locked, but the most unstable is flexed all the way up. Even with a super strong athlete, you can see that there can be a weakness in their ability to stabilize that knee. The next thing we do is we either take pressure off the spine by having them lie down or possibly bend their body to the side or maybe even suck their belly button in. And suddenly you realize, wow, there's an increase in strength. So they begin to realize that spinal position has something to do with the weakness that they're experiencing in their lower extremity. The same is true for the upper extremity, although the pressure is not as great. We have them sit down, their chin is tucked. They perform what's called a Valsalva maneuver. They take a deep breath and hold and squeeze as if they're trying to use the restroom. And that will increase the cervical disc pressure, not as much as it does the lumbar, but it gives a more compromised circumstance, and it's an easier way to test. So when I test the bicep, I have the patient in full flexion with the elbow all the way back. Tricep is just out of full extension. So that way I give myself a mechanical advantage, a testing advantage, because some of the people I test are outrageously strong. The strongest guy I tested was legitimately the strongest man in the world, 6'2", 405 pounds. And guess what? With that testing protocol, we could identify things that other doctors couldn't and help him take his game to the next level.
Wow, that's great. And you use that term viscerosomatic reflex. And just for all the listeners at home, what that is, that's an organ, viscerosomatic muscle. So the organs and the muscle are basically on two-lane highways regarding the nervous system. So you talked about core strength. Can you touch upon, let's say we have dysbiosis or a gut infection, maybe a parasite or maybe like an H. pylori infection, some type of gut inflammation. How does the organs that are inflamed due to all of the stress and antibiotics and high sugar diet and gluten, how does that affect the core strength in athletic performance?
Well, it's definitely going to take it down suboptimal. I like to tell people everything works together, and you hit on some high notes there. When you start talking about dysbiosis, I've lectured at major international conferences, and that's one of the greatest areas of research. That just means essentially bad bug growth. Dys means bad bio life, bad life in your gut.
Right.
And most of us are constantly exposed to antibiotics. 84% of antibiotics are used in livestock. So that we get antibiotics in the meat. When these animals eliminate, even the plants are taking up antibiotics. But what that causes is a level of gut inflammation. Now, most people probably don't understand how that would feel, but most people have some familiarity when someone has appendicitis, for instance. They have extreme tenderness in their gut. Their abdomen is very, very rigid, and that's just simply what you're describing as a viscerosomatic reflex from an inflamed appendix. Another thing that people get familiar with is maybe someone with a kidney stone or kidney infection. Their low back muscles get super, super tight and rigid. And again, that's just the organ reflexing back to the muscular system. The stomach will do it as well. The small intestines will do it as well. The large intestine will do it as well.
How about a heart attack with the left arm and jaw?
Yeah, there you go. That's probably the most known viscerosomatic reflex. Yeah, if suddenly someone feels shortness of breath and pain in their left arm, you better get to, pop an aspirin and get to the emergency room as soon as possible, because that's likely a very serious life-threatening circumstance. So yeah, those are all great examples. But you mentioned so many different things. You look at gluten, and I have been putting people on a gluten-free diet for my entire 23 years in practice. And even though there's not a lot of people with celiac disease, it's about 1 in 100 people have celiac disease. Mm-hmm. What we now know is this study of dysbiosis is that gluten actually promotes dysbiosis, or bad growth of bugs in the gut. And what I like to tell my patients is the difference between good bugs and bad bugs is what they eat and what they poop. Good bugs eat poop and poop nutrients. Bad bugs eat nutrients and poop toxins. And those poison our system, increase inflammation, and decrease our performance, function, and wellness.
I love those little one-liners you have there. I think you're also famous for the solution to pollution is dilution. Was that you as well?
I've said it many, many times, but I cannot claim to be the original. If you study the history of human sanitation, humans have lived near water bodies. Guess what? So they use that to dilute all of their wastes. And they've known that forever. The solution to pollution is dilution, and where our body comes into play is we're a closed system.
Right.
So our bodies will hold water when we're toxic. You have plenty of people walk around, and at the end of the day, they have a ring around their ankles where their socks were. Those are toxic people with extra fluid.
And also the allergic shiners around the eyes, too. That's notorious.
Absolutely. Yes.
That last line you just said, that was just profound. So good bugs eat poop and excrete nutrition, where bad bugs eat nutrition and excrete poop. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
That is just awesome. Very good. Very good. So what are the main issues that you're seeing in your practice today? Is it fatigue, thyroid, adrenal? Is it all of the above, a myriad of things? What's the average person walking into your office with today?
Well, I see the whole gamut, right? So, for instance, this morning I had 2 Olympic sprinters.
Wow.
And they were coming in for, core balance and improve the performance and a little bit of lower extremity issues. Last year, even this year, I don't know that I've had a single athlete lose track time with a hamstring injury. We're really, really good with hamstrings, balancing the pelvis, doing some specific acupuncture work, extremity adjustments, where they have not lost track time. But I've also seen a couple of people this morning with autoimmune disease. I've seen some people with stage 4 cancer. Not today. That'll be later on this week. But when you look at these people, the sad reality is our medical system, as Mark Hyman likes to call it, he's a great functional medicine doctor. He says our system is the name it, blame it, and tame it system. You name the disease, you blame the problem on it, and you try to tame it with a drug. But reality is fatigue is one of the signs of chronic poisoning. It could also be related to thyroid dysfunction. It could be related to adrenal distress, which you mentioned. It could be related to food allergy, to leaky gut. It could be, and often is, related to insomnia. And why do people have insomnia? Most commonly because they're running high stress and their brain doesn't shut down at night. So there's so many different things we say, but whoever comes in to see me, I always let them know that, one, we have to earn health. And we do that by eating right, drinking right, thinking right, moving right, sleeping right, pooping right, talking right. I like to call those the Magnificent Seven.
Right.
And even when you do the pristine lifestyle, we know now that only 7% of American farmland is considered prime. So 93% of the time, the plants and animals that people are putting in their body are from deficient soils, deficient food sources, intoxicated with either antibiotics, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. And therefore, we've got to clean out the body and supplement on a regular basis.
Supplementation is huge just because the soil is so devoid, the microbiota in the soil are destroyed, and like you said, I think 70 to 80% of all antibiotics are fed to animals, which then affects the plants. So then you get sick animals, sick plants, and my mentor Paul Chek says you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. You got to have quality nutrition to actually build the quality you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. By the way, I'm a big fan of Paul Chek as well. And what the quote that I always share with from Paul is, if you're not assessing, you're guessing.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to address someone's biochemical environment, guess what? I'm going to test their chemistry. I'm going to test blood, saliva, and urine. If I want to assess their structure, I'm going to sit them down and I'm going to do a really good structure evaluation. And then there's even wonderful things like energy medicine related to the acupuncture system, and we have ways of assessing energy as well.
That's great. So when you have patients coming in, what are the big, maybe 1 to 3 tests that you're commonly finding yourself running on patients? Is it like an organic acid test or an adrenal cortisol rhythm test? What are the tests that you are doing yourself?
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of in-office diagnostics, and so I do something called bioterrain assessment. But if you asked about the big 3 tests, so we'll share something about the adrenals. There's a new syndrome that's been defined in the literature, which is basically cortisol resistance. So a lot of people might be familiar with insulin resistance, and that means the body stops responding to insulin, so it has to produce more and more and more. Then ultimately the pancreas burns out, can't make the insulin the body needs, and leads towards diabetes. Well, with cortisol resistance, most of us are running high levels of cortisol, and ultimately our cells begin to ignore the signal of cortisol. A lot of people come to think of cortisol as a bad molecule, but it's life essential. We die without cortisol.
Absolutely.
So as we become cortisol resistant, then the body does not use cortisol to control inflammation. You get into a profound state of inflammation as well as leaky gut, suppressed immune system. So in our part of our bioterrain, we have a number of markers for adrenal functional distress, but a simple one is urinary chlorides, or something called the Kronosberg test that's been around for a long, long time. So as the adrenals become depleted, they actually start to spill, the patient spills more chloride into the urine. And so as we assess that, we can tell how is the body responding to adrenal hormones. So that's going to be a big one. I do a test called bioimpedance analysis. And in fact, I was just a co-author of a standard of care document on bioimpedance analysis. But here's a test that's been around for over 40 years, has over 2,000 published studies. It takes about 1 minute and it's non-invasive. We basically connect an electrode to the patient's hands and feet, run a very slight electrical current through the body, so slight it's not a contraindicator in pregnancy or pacemaker or anything like that. And we take the 2 numbers that we measure, electrical resistance, capacitive reactance, and put it into a computer program along with the patient's height, weight, age, and sex. We'll calculate lean tissue, fat tissue, water, be able to tell whether the water's inside the cell or outside the cell, and a number called phase angle that's actually published as a global health marker. So in doing that test, we can compare every person to everybody else on the planet and see where they fall in line. The last thing I would say is we do a saliva pH challenge. And it's very, very simple. You get a baseline of saliva pH, and by the way, we do it first thing in the morning, so the patient cannot have had anything to eat or drink.
Right.
They don't like the fact that we don't let them brush their teeth, and we're not crazy about it either, but we want good, pure data. And so once we get the baseline saliva, then we give them an amount of pure lemon juice, have them swish it in their mouth, swallow. That'll immediately change the saliva pH to acid, and then over the next 5 minutes, we measure the pH every single minute. And so the body has at least 12 known buffers for acid. In fact, all we do makes acid. Oxygen goes into the cell. Carbon dioxide comes out. It adds to water in the blood to form carbonic acid. Right. 100 trillion cells doing that 1 trillion times a day. So all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. When we're looking at that saliva pH, we're actually looking at the body's strongest buffer against acid. And that's very, very important because as we become progressively acid, all of our processes become inefficient. All of our hormones and enzymes become inefficient. And at super high levels of acid, of course, the patient can die. There's a medical condition known as metabolic acidosis. But maybe more common than that, more extreme, is we've now known for a long, long time that acid is the environment that promotes cancer. So if you look in the U.S., we have the highest cancer rate in the world. Man's lifetime risk 1 in 2, woman's 1 in 3. And I don't think it's by accident. And it's not because our diagnostics are better. It's that our food is so terrible. Our water is so terrible. We've engineered activity out of daily life, and we just have a very sick population to the point where we spend more on sick care than anywhere else in the world and really get less in return from our investment because we've bought into this paradigm that medicine's going to fix this. Nah, it's a cover-up of symptoms and a poor one at that.
Absolutely. And you talk about metabolic acidosis, and we know, or at least our listeners should know that, or be aware that the pH of our blood should be right around 7.3, 7.35, and it's pretty tightly regulated because our body is basically pH-driven to activate enzymes. So when you're talking about the pH going off, I think what you're alluding to is that our body's going to be using all these minerals and using these minerals to buffer all of the acids, which then depletes all these minerals for creating energy in the mitochondria, Krebs cycle, blood sugar stability. Was that kind of what you were trying to address there with the mineral deficiency there with the acidosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. The body has mineral buffers. The body has protein buffers. When we're talking about saliva, we're talking about what's known as the bicarbonate buffer.
Right.
But all of those buffering systems, as they become depleted, we become less efficient. It's estimated that human beings make 75,000 different enzymes, and every single enzyme we have is dependent on having the right amount of acid or alkaline in our system. So yeah, as we deplete our buffers, then we just don't feel good, we don't function good, and reality is we're not good. So that's one of the things that we really work to change with people.
Now, if we're eating like a paleo diet, we're trying to eat grass-fed organic beef, but we're also trying to add in high-quality organic, let's say green vegetables as well, do we have to be worried about being too acidic with our meat consumption?
No. There's plenty of studies that actually show that food really does not contribute to the acid burden within the body, but it does contribute to the buffering systems of the body. So for instance, again, we have 100 trillion cells in our body processing approximately 1 trillion molecules of oxygen. When oxygen and fuel go into the cell, the waste product is carbon dioxide, and that forms acid in the system. So one of the premier pharmacology journals said they estimate the average person, just through normal daily activity, creates about 15,000 units of acid. When you look at the weak acids in amino acids and fatty acids, or even things like citric acid, they suggest that for the average person, that's less than 100 units of acid. So we're comparing maybe 100 that we ingest to 15,000 that we make. So food is not really the contributor to acid burden, but high-quality foods help us make the proteins, the phosphates, have the mineral components to help us build our buffering systems.
Would you say eating lots of refined sugar and maybe food allergens, would that drive more to the acids in our diet?
Well, that's what's killing us.
Okay.
You know, when you start looking at refined sugar, you know, this is something that I've studied and lectured on for an extended period of time. But now they have functional MRIs. In 1800 in England, the average person ate about 5 pounds of processed sugar a year.
Right.
Now, in the United States, we peaked at 159 pounds per person per year in 1999. Well, we've gone down over the last 16 years, but what people need to understand is we've replaced pure sugar with artificial sweeteners.
Right.
And now the data shows that people that ingest artificial sweeteners gain more weight than people that eat pure sugar. And it's because they actually create a very, very toxic microbiome, or in case of dysbiosis, bad bugs in their gut. And the toxins generated by these bugs create inflammation and promote weight gain and diabetes.
Yeah, it really comes down to the gut. And then we also know 70 to 80% of the immune system's in the gall and the malt and our intestines, in the stomach and in the small intestine, which then immune suppression, more antibiotics, and then cancer and all these other immunocompromising conditions. And, you know, autoimmune conditions are on the rise too. So it's like this vicious cycle where we're just set up perfectly for it in a bad way.
You know what, I just gave a lecture on the immune system a week ago at a major conference. And the bottom line is, when you look at women, they get a lot more autoimmunity than men. Estrogens promote autoimmunity, androgens protect. That's a quote right out of the literature. Now, you might think that most guys would be okay then, but understand that most guys are low in androgens. We're so intoxicated by foreign estrogens and plastics, pesticides injected into animals, that men are much less manly than they once were. You see, they have this whole, pandemic of low testosterone, or low T as they like to call it. Guys are getting more and more autoimmune disease. And, I like to quote the journal Autoimmunity 2008. And what they said very simply is cell injury precedes autoimmune disease, whether it's from an infection, a chemical, a food reaction, or even a physical trauma. So our immune system's job is to kill bad cells. And if it perceives one of our cells as a threat, it's going to take it out. And it doesn't do that for normal cells. It does it for abnormal cells. Yeah. So the natural solution is, let's make the body healthy, and then there's no reason for the immune system to be on such an attack mode. Every one of us has antibodies against our own cells, over 100 antibody types, and they're associated with good health in advancing years. They did a study years ago on 100-year-old people that were, they had some longevity, obviously, to them, and were moderately healthy, and they compared those to, 40-year-old people that were not healthy. And the 40-year-olds across the board had more antibodies against their own tissue than did the 100-year-olds that were healthy. So they had less healthy cells. The immune system said, that's a threat. I'm going to kill it to try to protect the body. So a whole different picture on autoimmunity is emerging. It's not the immune system to blame. It's the toxic, sick body that causes autoimmunity.
And I saw this in one of your lectures, Dr. Bob. You had I think it was like an X and Y graph, and on one side you had being totally immune compromised and then having the cancer being the verdict of one end of that spectrum. And then you had the other where you're so immune sensitive where you're having an autoimmune condition because you're now attacking self. Does that ring a bell for you? I know you have so many slides.
Yeah. So, no. That's one that I'm very familiar with. So when we look at the immune system, we realize that one needs to protect us from our own cells. Yeah. And then it needs to protect us from outside the body. Well, then there's these conditions that they consider underprotection or what they're calling overprotection. Mm-hmm. So if you have underprotection against your own cells, guess what? You get cancer. And the new data is, I just listened to a PhD researcher last month, Andrew Keach. He says that the average person gets about 8 cancer cells every hour. So we want the immune system to be vigilant. And by the way, the enemies of the immune system are stress and sugar. So we want to keep those under control. But if we don't have or if we have too much attack against our own cells, they like to call that autoimmunity. Reality is, again, it's not the immune system that's problematic, but the bad cells. When we have underprotection against foreign cells to our body, then we're going to get an infection. Or if we have overprotection against foreign particles, that's an allergen. And so those are the types of immune response you can get. Underprotection against yourself, cancer. Overprotection against yourself, autoimmunity. Underprotection against the environment, infection. Overprotection, allergy. And there are basically 4 components that are known to be universal modulators of the immune system. Vitamin D is one of them. And that's important because about 1 billion people around the planet are estimated to have a frank vitamin D deficiency, even below acceptable levels. But, in my clinic, I see probably 85-90% of people don't have an acceptable level of vitamin D, which most functional medicine practitioners agree is 50 to 70.
70, yeah.
There's a Chinese herb called Ganoderma, which is a major modulator of the immune system, proven against 7 different types of cancer, powerful allergy modulator, great for autoimmunity as well as infection. And so that's a major immune modulator, as is another Chinese botanical called perylacine. And then the last is actually an adrenal steroid, which is called DHEA. DHEA is a profound immune modulator. So if you take a look, any autoimmune condition that you can think of, I would encourage you, go to PubMed and look at DHEA and lupus, DHEA and rheumatoid arthritis, DHEA and multiple sclerosis. Yeah. It helps every one of these conditions. And that suggests to me that stress is a major trigger in these autoimmune circumstances.
Yeah, and DHEA, about 50% of it is being produced by the adrenal glands, which we know are our stress-handling glands. So the more stressed we are, the more sugar, the more inflamed, that output's going to be lower and lower and lower. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that herb Ganoderma. Is this the same as reishi mushroom?
Yeah, it goes by 3 different names. It's known as Ganoderma lucidum. It's also known as reishi. It's also known as lingqi. But it's also been termed the herb of immortality and the 10,000-year mushroom. It's got, in my opinion, the most documented medicinal herb benefits of any herb that's out there.
Yeah, and there's also a fair amount of studies on it being combined with astragalus. Are you familiar with the synergy in the herb together?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the very first book that I wrote forward to, and I'm approaching 20 books that I wrote forwards to, but it was a book called Herbal Virtues, and here's the first line. There's a synergy in nature that can't be duplicated and can't be isolated. So, the pharmaceutical companies say, wow, these plants work good. Let's isolate a component. Let's find a way to synthesize it in the lab and tweak it so we can patent it. And then they lose all this synergy. So within the whole plant itself, there's synergy, but then you're right. There's plenty of herbs that work beautifully together. Ganoderma and astragalus work remarkably well. We've seen and added it to echinacea in a way that works remarkably well. So yeah, we're massive fans of high quality herbs.
Yeah, I am as well. And reishi is one of those herbs I use in a lot of my practice, especially with Epstein-Barr patients. And reishi isn't been in the literature for a while in Asian countries. I think is first line therapy for liver cancer in Japan. Are you aware of that?
You know what? I'm not familiar with Japan. In the U.S. literature, I've read over 500 PubMed studies on reishi Ganoderma, and the 7 cancers that the U.S. literature supports are leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, breast cancer, inflammatory breast cancer, and melanoma.
Wow.
And there are literally peer-reviewed medical studies, but given that they also have peer-reviewed studies that show that Ganoderma increases the function of natural killer cells, and those are the cells that kill cancer cells as well as viral infected cells, it makes sense that it would be first-line therapy for any and all cancers.
Absolutely, it should be. Now, did I hear that you came out with a coffee with that Ganoderma in it? Is that correct?
I wish that was my genius that came up with that coffee, but no, there is a company that has the coffee. They've patented the ability to put Ganoderma in coffee, tea, hot chocolate, soap, toothpaste, and so it's an alkalizing coffee. It controls inflammation, gives people an immune boost. We share it with our patients. And, across the board, they love it. So, yeah, it's a magnificent coffee. And if anybody wants to contact me about that, I think we'll give my website info at the end, at thedrbob.com. So
Great. And then also, are you running a CD57 immune count in any of your patients at all?
I don't. But what I look at is what are the enemies of the immune system. Mm-hmm. And the top 2 are going to be stress and sugar. Then we start getting into toxins and sleep deprivation. And so I think I'm going after it at a higher level. Mm-hmm. There's certainly room to look at these precise things, but what I've found out, and it's through years of trial and error, is if you clean out the gut, clean up the diet, control the inflammation, manage the stress, get people exercising a little bit, a good night's sleep, the need to run outside lab goes away very, very quickly because every parameter that we measure improves under those circumstances. Yeah.
Very good. And when you talked about the acid-alkaline balance there, you mentioned that it's not really going to be affected much with high-quality meats and good vegetables, but it will be affected from the diet that's bad, the high sugar and the food allergen. So that's the part that's going to have the biggest effect on the pH, not necessarily the good stuff we're eating. Is that correct? Did I hear you right?
Yeah, it's essentially our reaction to the food that's causing problems. So anytime that you're feeding dysbiosis or creating inflammation, you're making yourself sick, you're making yourself acid, you're taking away your energy efficiency, you're using body resources that could be, using to, sing and dance and heal because you're having to deal with these reactions that you're creating.
Right.
So, I always tell people everything counts and you want to choose wisely. What would one of my favorite questions is, what would the highest version of me do right here, right now? And I do like to quote Og Mandino, and I have the very base of my life pyramid is love. I also have purpose and discipline, but Og Mandino has a long dissertation on love. Well, one of his lines is, and most of all, I will love myself, for when I do, I will zealously inspect all things that I allow to enter my mind, my heart, my soul, and my body. And if people are doing that, they have a leg up on the rest of the world because we're not zealously inspecting. We're breathing air which is not clean. We're drinking water which is terrible. We're eating food which is toxic and depleted. And we're paying a massive price to the tune of almost $9,000 per every man, woman, and child in the U.S. in terms of sick care. And it's got to stop because it's not sustainable.
That's great. Wow, that's a really great quote by Og Mandino there. I like that. I'll have to write that one down.
I'll send it to you.
Very good. Very good. Now, how do you get access to, or how do you structure your life in a way where you can take in all of these extra studies? Do you have like a Google Scholar alert? How do you extract all this information from the scientific literature without being overwhelmed or too overwhelmed?
You know what? It's just a simple discipline. It's something that I've done for, at this point, 23 years. But, with most of these peer-reviewed medical journals, you can have them send you free of charge the table of contents every time they publish. So I'll go ahead and I'll look at the table of contents and I'll find an article which is interesting, and then you can almost always get the abstract, and if the abstract is really interesting, guess what? I'll buy the article. But I typically budget between 5 and 10 hours a week, every single week except 2 weeks vacation a year, to study. And so it comes out to a lot of really good study that moves me forward and keeps me on the cutting edge. And I'll quote Confucius. He says, if you do what you love and love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I've always had passion about just staying just a little ahead of the crowd so I can always bring my patients the best of the best. And quite often they'll come into me and they'll ask, hey, what'd you learn lately? And I've always got something to share.
Well, that's always great. And are you using Medscape or PubMed to extract this? or
PubMed. PubMed is my go-to. There's a reason for that. I have been hired as an expert witness for natural cases, and by the way, all three times my cases have won. People were being sued for frivolous things, about possibly errors in natural medicine, and the data is very, very clear that natural medicine is powerful. So these PubMed citations from peer-reviewed journals basically are accepted as facts that will stand up in a court of law. So when I teach license renewal seminars, which I do to doctors all over the world, I need to have data that basically is peer-reviewed, and PubMed does that.
Oh, very good. Excellent. So the nice thing about you, Dr. Bob, is you practice what you preach, you walk your talk, you look your part, and a lot of doctors, a lot of nutritionists, a lot of healthcare providers out there don't do that. So could you give kind of our listeners a window into what your life is like? What time do you get up? What do you eat? Just kind of give us a rundown of your day. What time do you go to bed? Everything. Stress, exercise, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, let's start with sleep. It's absolutely critical. So I'm in bed by 9:30 every night. The last hour is wind down. I usually read for about the last 30 minutes. It's lights out. I get up at 5:30. I get up, I brush my teeth. I have good organic toothpaste, right, that has Ganoderm in it. I do some oil swishing with coconut oil. Oil pulling is really, really good for oil health as well as the rest of you. I'll drink a nice cup of organo or organic, Ganoderma coffee. I'll do some reading. I'll do some meditation. I'll wake up. I'll be very, very thankful. I read a devotional. I make sure I thank God for all the beauty in my life and all the good around me, and ask Him for help throughout the day. Then I start my stretching, and I do my own private martial arts training for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour every single morning. Take a nice shower, see my first patient at 17. I'm going to have my first meal sometime after the office, and I have all kinds of wonderful, delicious smoothies. So I have different medical foods that can support detoxification, control inflammation, colostrum, which is really, really good to heal the gut, vitamin D, probiotics, organic superfoods, fruits, vegetables. We put them all in that smoothie, and I drink it. And, there's part of the reason for doing it at the office. One, it's incredibly convenient, but patients see me doing that. And they'll just simply ask me, what is that? Would you like to try it? And I've learned a long, long time ago, I've drank things that probably people wouldn't think about drinking because it doesn't taste good. But my latest round of smoothies, and for the last couple of years, have been purely delicious. So when we show patients a way that they can drink the most delicious and nutritious smoothie, that they can possibly have, then they're in. And if just by simply changing to that, their life gets better.
Are you using sorry to interrupt, are you using a Vitamix blender there or just a regular blender?
You know what? We just have a bullet in the office. Well, Vitamix is awesome, but in the office we have a bullet. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's easy and inexpensive. Patients can replicate it relatively easy at home. I've been blessed that I'm ahead of my life in terms of practice and investments and multiple businesses. So I have pure joy in practice. So I work from 7 to noon, Monday through Thursdays, and Wednesdays my long day. I also add 2 to 5. So a couple days a week, I'll do some private training with a world-class trainer. I'll even give Jay Armstrong a plug. He's absolutely fantastic. And then my grandmaster in mixed martial arts is Al Garza, who's an 8th degree black belt and 4 different black belts. And in fact, last week I even did 2 days of training with the world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So besides that type of training, I'll do my own stretching. I'll do my own cardio. When it comes to connecting with my family, I read a book last year called The 5-Minute Rule. Yeah. And it's interesting what you can accomplish in 5 minutes, but this book just came to the point, we've got people that are important in our lives. Take 5 minutes, one-on-one, connect with them. I've got 3 beautiful children. My son is 21. He's got, incredibly successful in his own business, has his own home. But we'll still connect 5 minutes a day. My girls, 18 and 16, will connect. My beautiful wife, at least 5 minutes. And I've been married to the same wonderful woman, Kelly, for going on 27 years. And,
wow.
As happy as we've ever been. So, which kind of reminds me, I listened to a TED Talk, and I love TED Talks, and I highly promote them. But the gentleman was talking about how to find your life purpose in 5 seconds or less. That was the title of it. And he was a Yale grad. And he went to his 25-year reunion. And he said, you know what, all these people from Yale, they had success in the business world. He said, but really only about 20% of them were happy. And the people that were happy were following their passion. The people that were miserable were chasing a dollar. So, if I could get everybody that's on the other end of this one way or the other, it would be to encourage them Do what you love what you do, find your passion, be excellent at everything, give everything your best, because that's ultimately our purpose. Our purpose is to be our highest self at every moment. And when we do that, we make the world better. So if your passion's health, listen, share this information, share the podcast, walk in, listen to this on a weekly basis. Go and look and see what you like in terms of online. I've got plenty of education materials that I'm more than happy to share, and I've sold those for 20 plus years around the world. But find your passion, follow it, live life to the fullest, and try to help everybody around you do the same thing.
Oh, very good. Excellent. And how did you get into lecturing? Because you've been lecturing so long. How did that reveal itself, or what inspired you to go in that direction?
Well, let me first say that my first career was not a success in my mind. I graduated second in my class in electrical engineering. I did it because I had a scholarship to a very prestigious school, but never really liked it. And so I realized I wanted to be a chiropractor. So I went back to school and I talked to my chiropractor and I said, I want to be successful. I want to be good. What do I do? And he said, here's what you do. You listen to people who are successful.
Yeah.
He says, when you're in school, they're going to teach you to get a license. That's good. They'll teach you the ins and outs, the rules. He says, but you need to go visit successful chiropractors. So I did. I spent so much time talking to successful doctors. So when I got into the student clinic, I literally had a waiting list practice. I finished all my credits in 6 weeks, and the students were shocked. They said, wow, would you consider teaching a seminar about how you did that? I said, sure. So I literally had 60 people show up on a Saturday morning, pay me $200 to learn what I had learned from all these great doctors. And I said, just follow around great people. Well, after I taught that seminar, I promoted a lot of clinical nutrition. I got sponsored by a nutrition company. So they started promoting seminars around. And I had a passion for teaching. I certainly had a passion for health. So I didn't show up unprepared and say, oh, let's talk. I had a complete, solid, thorough outline reference with solid goals about how I wanted to move people forward to improve their practice and improve their life. Well, then I got sponsored by another nutrition company that literally took me all over the world. So I've been in North America, South America, Caribbean islands, Hawaii, Europe, Africa. I haven't done Asia yet. Nor the North Pole or South Pole, but those are on my radar.
That's great.
But B.J. Palmer said it best. I got on fire about chiropractic, and people came from all over to watch me burn. That's what I'd like to think people would describe me about my passion for health. I love it, I live it, I share it, and I keep growing. And my world is certainly better for being guided by really good people. So I thank you, Beat, for being a guiding light to so many out there now.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to see that you got a website, because I know for the longest time you were like incognito. You were this guy that you had to get like a referral from to even get in there. Yeah,
I finally caught up, right? And I probably need to improve that some as well. But reality is, it's a really good friend of mine, and he put it together. He said, Bob, come on, you need a website. It's like, yeah, all my patients are referred, and I'm fine. And it's like, no, let's put together a website for you. So you know what? That's a good thing. And there's a book out there called An Army of Davids. And basically it talks about how the little guy with social media and a good web presence, the big guy can't keep up because the little guy can serve. And so you're excellent at that. I'll compliment you again and again, and that's certainly a lot that I could learn from you on that. But we have a web presence, and it's growing.
That's great. Thanks, Doc. Thanks. So the average person that's watching the show, we got a lot of biohackers. People they're testing this, they're taking supplements, they understand the value of sleep and diet. So speaking to that person, right, they're already doing so many things right. What are 3 things that you think, based on that person that's already listening, that you would recommend to improve performance, energy, vitality, libido, cognition, brain power, the whole 9 yards? What would those 3 things be?
Well, I'm going to go to a book called The Talent Code. And the Talent Code said the very best of the best have 3 things in common. They have passion, they have discipline for hard work, and they have master coaching. Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned guys like Paul Chek. He's a master coach. Charles Poliquin's a master coach. Jay Armstrong's a master coach. You're a master coach for nutrition and lifestyle, but they need a coach because there's only so far you can go on yourself. And, it's really, really hard to see where you need to improve. So number one, get someone, and really maybe a coach in every area of your life. I listened to a gentleman by the name of Harvey McKay His first bestseller was called How to Swim with the Sharks and Not Get Eaten Alive. But this guy has more coaches than anybody I can imagine. He's got a voice coach. He's got a tennis coach. He's got a speech coach. He's got a singing coach. He's got, a business coach. But he says, you know what, in my life, he says, I've never spent a nickel on coaching. Now, he says, I've invested millions, and it's made me hundreds of millions.
Wow.
So you don't want to look at that as an expenditure, but an investment. So invest in yourself, invest in coaches. The next thing is, I think a lot of people are doing really, really well in terms of quality of what they're putting in their body. At least I hope that they are. But now, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So it's going to go back to almost the coach mindset again, but get a solid, thorough, functional assessment and see what kind of I's you can dot and T's you can cross. Because again, I see world-class athletes. I see people that are running, sub 10-second 100 meters, and within 2 weeks of just fine-tuning them in terms of their chemistry or structure, we get them getting their own personal best. So pick what you have a passion for, get a coach for that, get a coach for your chemistry, get a coach for your structure, and that's going to be the big start. Passion, chemistry, structure, you're going to win in life if you have good guidance.
That's great. And that was number 3 you said right there?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with coaches, but I'm going to have a life coach, I'm going to have a chemistry coach, and I'm going to have a structure coach. And I'm kind of blessed in that I serve as 2 of those coaches, right, in terms of chemistry and structure. But, in terms of whatever you have a passion for, get a solid mentor or coach in that area as well.
That's great. So you do a lot of seminars. How do our listeners find out more about you? I know you have a big strength and conditioning or sports performance seminar coming up in Montreal. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've taught sports nutrition, for about 20 years, and Montreal's a great market. There's a former Mr. Universe out there, Roberto Sabatini, who I'm great friends with, Ryan Hawkins, another Poliquin/Czech trainer, brilliant guys that help promote there. I probably need to get a better look on my website. I'm doing lectures for something called Northwest Health Science University, so if you Google Dr. Bob Rakowski seminar, you'll probably find some of it. I probably need to get a better listing on my Facebook page as well as on my website. But if you Google me, you'll find that I'm in a lot of places. I teach between 40 and 50 different events a year, whether we're talking about nutrition, performance, kinesiology. I've got it all. So
right.
the seminar on sports performance, I share the things that I've done with world-class athletes and weekend warriors to make them better with really hard-hitting, solid clinical strategies for both assessment and intervention.
Is that seminar also going to be available via audio as well?
I don't know that I'm going to record that one, but I do have a recorded version of sports nutrition that is available already, yes.
I'm going to have to pick that one up. That's great.
You know what? My gift to you, I'm going to send you a Dropbox right after this because I certainly appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And that talk's going to be Montreal, Canada, Saturday, March 28th, 8 to 5. And we'll put this out ASAP so it's relevant to anyone that wants to hear more about this. And you also teach applied kinesiology courses up in, I think, Minnesota, which will be relevant to more of the healthcare professionals that are listening. And then what about the average person that just wants to get more about you? The drbob.com is the website. Anything else that's more relevant to the average maybe patient that wants to come down and visit you? I think you also do phone consults too. Any more information about that?
Yeah, all those things are available. thedrbob.com has patient consult paperwork that they can fill out. One of the things that I like to tell people is there's magic to actually seeing a person, touching a person, interacting with a person, sensing their energy. And sometimes we overlook the intuitive part of it, but I have such a strong preference for being face-to-face with someone. But with that said, I've done Skypes with Singapore and South America and, halfway around the world where we've had good outcomes. So if it's feasible to come see me, that's always best. But if not, fill out the paperwork. Let's connect. Let's talk. I have so many different audios that now have been recorded over the years that are available via MP3 and Dropbox that we can get to people. I've got a 48-hour series in nutrition. I've got some brief lectures, nutrition and cancer, stress, blood sugar dysregulation, endocrine imbalance. Almost any topic you could think of, we've got.
Well, that's great. I truly believe you are one of the best experts in the world in this form of, in functional medicine and human health and performance. So I appreciate you being on the show and sharing everything, all this great information with our listeners. Is there any closing words, Dr. Bob?
Well, I want to let you know that I certainly appreciate the way you make our world better. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share. And, I'm going to keep telling everybody, do what you love what you do, seek to be your highest self, make our world better, and we're all going to get better.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.